So let's begin. Tonight we'll have really an introduction to Sefer Shoftim. And when we think of Sefer Shoftim, normally there's a certain famous pasuk that comes to mind that people think is the embodiment of Sefer Shoftim, and that pasuk being and normally we approach the reading of Sefer Shoftim based off that pasuk, something in the following way. We say, the book is written to highlight the necessity of a melech, and therefore we talk about the failures of the shofet model, and we could see the failures throughout the book. It's a bad model, it's a failed model, and then the book concludes and tells us, okay, now you could understand why we need a melech. And really, Sefer Shemuel is really the beginning of Malchut in Am Yisrael. Shemuel is the king who anoints both Shaul and David, and therefore, even though he dies in the middle of the book, right, we finish the book with the death, basically, of David. Okay, right, that's normally how we do it. So in Perek Aleph, we would read it, it goes something like this.
So, Perek Aleph, it's very confusing.
Okay, yeah, we're going to get into it, right? But you would read Perek Aleph something like this. Yehoshua is dead, and there still remain pockets of enemies to capture. Mm-hmm. And we see each shevet going at it alone. And since each shevet is going at it alone, they can't fully capture because they lost the central leader. They don't have a melech, and therefore they don't capture the non-Jews in the land, and therefore they run into trouble throughout the Sefer. That's right, that's a good summation of how we normally view Sefer Shoftim and the Pasuks that guides us. This is guiding Pasuk by Yamim Ahem and Melech Yisrael Isha Yishad Be'anav Ya'aseh. And that's pretty much what we do, perfect, and it serves as the bridge to Yehoshua, to Shemuel, and maybe we'll even say, hey Yehoshua, why didn't you appoint a Melech after your lifetime? Which we discussed in previous classes, correct? I remember, but I'm saying, right, that's normally, these are the normal associations and discussion points we have
considered a king
with Sefer Shoftim. Right, so
the Rambam count him as a king.
Right, so we're going to talk about it a little bit, the distinction between the Shofet and the Melech, and see why maybe Moshe and Yehoshua, even though Moshe definitely, V'hi b'shurun Melech, seems to be a Melech, it's not exactly what we're talking about.
Shemuel is not a king. But he doesn't want a king because whatever he's doing, he thinks is working.
Okay, that's an interesting question. Is it a personal thing? Okay, let's not for now. Keep in mind, God is also involved there, but let's stay away from Shmuel.
God doesn't want a king. So
but stay away from Shmuel. Stay away from Shmuel, right?
Didn't Shmuel write Shoftim?
Shmuel wrote Shoftim, correct. So it would be odd if Shmuel, by the way, according to Hazal, that Shmuel writes Shoftim, so then it's pretty weird. Right. If this is our assumption that the whole book of Shoftim is to talk about the importance of a melech, and we'll say, Shemuel is the guy who made the two melechim in Am Yisrael, Shaul and David. Why is he so upset? A little bit complicated in Shemuel. But we're not learning Shemuel now, so let's stay away from that, because that creates a more nuanced situation. Our question is that really a safe assumption of Sefer Shoftim? And the first thing I'm going to do for you is as follows. Everybody knows that Shoftim in its beginning, after it kind of does this weird introduction of Yehoshua, starts off Yehoshua is dead, and it seems to be he's alive a little bit, then he dies again. I know what you're talking about. And then we get to what's famously called the cycle of the Shoftim, right? So if you go to Pasuk Yud Aleph in Perek Bet, all the way till the end of the Perek, we get this cycle of Shoftim, right? And Bnei Yisrael do some form of Avodah Zarah worship. Hashem gets angry, he gives them enemies, they suffer, then they're going to cry out to Hashem, and Hashem gives them Shoftim, and then they eventually, the Shoftim, they keep the people in line, and then when the Shofet dies, then they go and they re-worship Avodah Zarah, and the cycle continues. Right? Mm-hmm. That's pretty nice. But you know what the problem is? If that's the basic introduction to Shoftim after this perek and a half of dealing with what's the Nahala or whatever, there's a tremendous problem. Because if that's the crux of the book, what word should I expect to find at the end of that statement of the cycle of Shoftim? Vayamim Ahem and Melech B'Yisrael. Right? If it's coming to present the failure of the Shoftim, So okay, that's the best spot to put the pasuk. And
When
instead,
does
so,
that pasuk first show up?
so I'm reading. I'm looking at Pedig Bit. I'm reading the thing, and lo and behold, it's not there. So now I'm confused, and I say, wait a minute, what's happening? This is supposed to be Sefer Shoftim. So I actually, I'm embarrassed to say, I actually had to do a Google search to find where's the
Vav,
first
no?
time it's actually mentioned. What?
Wav? Is it Wav?
No, it's in Pedig Yud Zayin.
No way. All the way in Pesach Micha?
Yeah, it's Pesel Michan Piligash Bagivah. That's where it's mentioned.
Not mentioned once
It's
before?
not mentioned in any point of time of the Shoftim. And definitely not in the beginning of the book. And therefore, gentlemen, we have a problem. They can't convince me right now that the book
We need a minute.
is about we need a melech. Because the pasuk we need to be there is not there. Not only that. So I started, I said, well, let me reread. So I started rereading. And you go and you reread the Pirakim. Okay. So we start off, and we seem to assume that this is a bad thing, that the Shivatim are fighting by themselves. And it's the failure to fight together that leads to the failure to conquer the nations.
Ask Hashem what to do, and he says so, and go,
Excellent. Okay, good. So firstly, I see the first pasuk, Yehuda Yaleh, which is interesting. Okay.
It was also juxtaposed with, them not, basically serving Hashem. So that's
No, but we have
intertwined.
a problem, right? Meaning, are we supposed to capture all of these nations? You see, it's a problem because all of a sudden,
What do you mean by supposed to?
are we supposed to? Were we?
Is Hashem
Was it?
commanded?
Was
What
it
do you
like?
mean?
Was it like if they all went together and fought together? Would they have captured all of these cities at that point and time? Right, and almost you
Saying
read.
they took a different strategy?
Right. Well, no. Watch, you'll see. You'll see what I'm going to say. You'll see what I'm saying, right? Meaning that's the assumption, though, right? If they fought together, they would have captured. They didn't fight together, therefore they were too strong for them, and it ended up being a problem. So we look, and all of a sudden, the Malach comes in the beginning of Perek Bet, and he gives a message to Am Yisrael, and he says, "I told you don't make a treaty with Yoshvei Haaretz. You didn't listen to me. I also told you, V'gam amarti in pasuk Gimel, very strange pasuk here. Lo agaresh otam mipenechem, v'lechem letzidim, v'lo lehem, v'lechem lemokesh." Now, you can't read that pasuk as a punishment. How do I know? Because the Torah says repeatedly that I'm not going to kick out the non-Jews all right away. Lo agareshenu, right? Me'at me'at agareshenu min haaretz, pented be'alecha hayat hasedeh. Lo tuchal kalutam mahed. You're not going to be able to get rid of them right away, right? And also, not only that, so there's a sense in the Torah, I don't want to kick them out because I don't want to make the land desolate and have Hayat Sadeh come into play, which is an interesting thing because God, if you could help them capture the people, why can't you help with the Hayat Sadeh? And therefore, I realize that maybe there might be something else going on, and indeed, we see in Perek Gimel in the beginning, Ve'ela hagoyim asher hiniach Adonai lanasot bam et Yisrael.
Test that.
Well, to test us, but to test us in two ways, it seems to be, right? It seems to be they're going to test us. Kol asher yidu kol milhamu Kenaan rak lema'an da'atu Rabbi Nisan le'lammeda milhama asher rak asher lefanim le'da'um. To test them in war, that they still need to finish the conquest, but also, and this seems to be connected, meaning God is actively seeking some form of allegiance of Am Yisrael, and therefore He's not going to get rid of all the Goyim right away. He's going to help them settle the land, and it's going to be a process, and you'll learn how to fight, that's number one, which is a positive thing, and not only will you learn how to fight, but also we'll see if you're going to be loyal to Hashem or not, or you're going to make treaties with them, or you're going to be too scared to fight, and are you going to keep them in the land, or are you going to start learning from their ways and worshipping Avodah Zarah?
So to me, that sounds like it's a permanent thing, meaning the test should always be there for all generations.
So it seems to be, I don't know for all generations, but definitely for the first couple of generations until they establish the society that they're finally supposed to establish, that they're finally loyal to Hashem, And once they're fully loyal to Hashem, that they trust in Hashem to go to Milhama, then we no longer have this problem. By the way, you could look, if you look at the Torah, if you look at Kiryat Yam Suf, if you look, basically all of it was to Ve'aminu b'Hashem Moshe Avdo, for what purpose? For Milhama, Ha'amonai Ish Milhama. Right? That's really what it's for. To have the confidence to fight, to go trust in Hashem.
Don't go out to Lishtim, right, because you can't fight, you're not going to be one of them.
Right, we have it multiple times in the Torah. Hashem is Ish Milhama.
But at the same time, that Hashem, obviously, it seems from the Navi, wants to test them. In the Torah, and all through Devarim, we see Hashem telling them, don't leave anything left.
No, but yeah, don't leave anything left, in the sense, don't make treaties with them and allow them to say. But don't think you're going to be able to capture them all right away.
Right. So God's original plan was, you're going to kick all them out eventually, but it's going to happen slow, and I'm going to leave them there, and it's your job to finish the deal.
Now, by the way, who do we take a major burden off?
Yoshua.
Right? Yeah. When we say this is part of the divine plan, Yehoshua captures most of the territory. It's part of the divine plan that he's not going to capture every single city of the minor cities or pockets of Goyim. And by the way,
that's very good.
We find something very interesting, and I think this is actually nice. When Am Yisrael get attacked the first time by Otniel ben Kenaz being the Shofet, who's he fighting against? Meaning they're not an internal enemy.
Far away.
Right, good. Why? Because there's no internal enemy strong enough to fight them. Yehoshua did his job of weakening and the small pockets. Then the next Shofet, right, where we have Ehud ben Gera.
The Uven Gad side.
Yeah, it's Moav, very good, right? And how many years, V'tishkot ha'aretz, how many years? 40 years for Otniel, and 80 years for Ehud. And then you have Shamgad ben Anat, okay?
Saying they were very strong in the beginning of Israel.
So it's 120 years minimum, in which Shirat Devorah, or whatever, Devorah and Barak are coming onto the scene, where you finally have a threat that's internal. Sisra and Yavin Melech Hatzor, who's part of Canaan. Why does it take 120 years to have an internal threat? Because there are no internal threats. Yehoshua really weakened them to the point where there's pockets of Goyim that are there to test Am Yisrael, and therefore Yehoshua did his job, what he was supposed to do. Am Yisrael couldn't really have done anything different, and therefore it's not really...
No, they should have driven them out completely at that point.
But at some point in time, yes. But I'm saying it seems to be the fact that right away they didn't get rid of all of them. It was fine. It was part of God's plan. It wasn't because they lacked unity. And therefore, it doesn't seem to be a failure on the part of Am Yisrael to not appoint a melech. Meaning this introduction to the book seems to be very God-driven, is my point. And God has an agenda here as opposed to Am Yisrael and what they're trying to do. So that's the first thing.
I have a question.
So to be clear, the problem is not the fact that they're not unified. The problem is not the fact that they don't kill everybody. The problem is that they're going to assimilate. That was the nisayon of Hashem, and unfortunately, they don't succeed at getting out of it. Now, I want to pause for a moment before we continue our analysis, because according to us now, we just said we really need to create a new approach to Sefer Shoftim. Oh, and one last thing. When Otniel comes and attacks Kushan Rish'atayim, who is Otniel Shofet over? If you notice these words, this I think is actually very important. So if you look at Perek Gimel Pasuk Yud, ותהיה עליו רוח אדוני, וישפוט את ישראל, ויעשה מלחמה וייתן אולי בידו לכושן לשעתיים מלך עליו, ותעש ידו על כושן לשעתיים, ותשקוט הארץ 40 שנה. Sounds like he's fighting on behalf of the entire Am Yisrael. Not only that, Ehud, same problem, right? That it sounds like Eglon Melech Moav is not attacking a Shevet, he's attacking Am Yisrael totally. And indeed, when he blows the shofar, we see Vayiredu imo bnei Yisrael min hahad. We don't see any concept that we're divided into Shevatim yet. Now, I agree we are going to get divided into Shevatim. Are you going to tell me Shirat Devorah, famously Liflagot Reuven, Lama Yashavta bin Mishpetayim? Why are you sitting? Why are you not coming to war? We're going to see in the time of Gideon, Ephraim and Menashe are almost going to come to civil war over this. We're going to see in the time of Yiftach that they do come to civil war over this. We're going to see later on, by obviously the Milhama with the tribe of Binyamin, that all of Am Yisrael is not fully united, even though there it's actually interesting because you have all of Yisrael besides for Binyamin. But fine, I'm not saying we're not going to see divisions, but my point is the book doesn't open up that way. The divisions come after 120 years, and over time, after assimilating, of losing sight of the national project because of following the ways of the Goyim that Hashem left in order to test them, then we run into problems, and then we forget about the grand plan of Am Yisrael, and we forget to go to war together, and so on and so forth. Fine, but that's a problem that wasn't specific to the Shoftim. It was a problem specific to the fact that Hashem, we failed the test as Am Yisrael of not assimilating with the Goyim around us that Hashem purposely left there in order to test us. If we take this approach, right, you get the sense, wait a minute, I need a whole new understanding of what a shofet is, and what is the purpose of Sefer Shoftim if not to tell me that the Shoftim failed?
So, you're saying, even though the Pesukim tell us Bnei Yisrael did sin and did leave God in the beginning with Otniel, and they're still more united, and they're still
right. I think
still on a higher level than the later Bnei Yisrael we see.
1,000%. I think 1,000%. By the way, you could even see, you almost get the sense that the Shoftim that they have are much more flawed. Yiftach, right. Shimshon.
The influence of the Goyim almost is there, even in the good people.
Right, correct. Good way to put it.
So, and Otniel though, seems to be alive during the time of Yeshua, and don't we know that the Yeshua to the Zekenim after Yeshua, everything was good.
Right, exactly.
So how do you have a problem?
Okay, obviously maybe he wasn't the Zekenim, maybe Kalev was one of the Zekenim, but then obviously he's very quickly able to correct the wrongs, right?
It's 8 years.
It's only 8 years, right? If you notice the first time the oppression is for 8 years, then it goes to 20 years, right? We get that sense that there's an increasing amount each time, because Am Yisrael a little bit slower to come out of their shells. So the first thing we need to do right now is talk about the distinction between a melech and a shofet for a moment, in order so we can understand the shofet really a terrible thing. What's the simplest difference between a melech and a shofet?
One's chosen by God.
No, so a melech. The simplest idea is like this: that a shofet, his children, are not automatically replacing him. There's not an automatic thing that you get the job. Whereas a melech, right? It's clear. That's the whole idea of a melech, is a permanent structure, and therefore you don't need to fight about it. That's why you find in Sefer Melachim something very strange. Twice, Shevet Yehuda, Malchut Yehuda, kills the king, and twice they appoint the son as the king.
Right, they
as
won't
the
leave
king instead of the father. Right, the good was the dynasty. Okay, you don't like the king, kill the king, get the son. Okay, but the last thing you want is to have a new dynasty. Why? Because there's political stability, and that's a big thing, and that's why, right? Any kingdom, there's always this importance of having a heir, a male heir specifically, right? In order to ensure that nobody's going to start fighting about it, it's obvious who deserves the kingdom, and everything shalom al Yisrael, right, so to speak, right? It's clear who's supposed to be the king, and you never have a problem, and in Malchut Yehuda it works pretty nicely until the end. That's the major difference between a melech and a shofet. The second difference is that a shofet is there in a time of crisis militarily. He doesn't lead a standing army. Whereas the melech, one of the biggest things of the melech is he has money in order to pay for a permanent retinue of soldiers that could go and protect the country, almost like professional soldiers. Right? No, I don't think mercenaries. No. It could be professional soldiers, right? He pays for an army that's a standing army, and then also obviously he could hire mercenaries with the money he has, but I think he supports an army. Okay, and that's why the Torah has to tell you, lo yadbelu susim, kesef zahav, lo yadbelu me'od, so you can't have too big of a standing army, but he has a permanent standing army. So Shofet, what he does, he's mustering the townspeople to bring their pitchforks and come to war, right? That's what he's doing. He's not there's no permanent army that's training on a daily basis that's being paid for and provided for. Everybody's working. It's time for war. You are a military leader. You're going to lead us to war. Obviously, we see the shofet is not just a military leader. He also cares for the religious welfare of the people as well, and he's ensuring they're doing things, and that's probably where we get this idea of shofet, because he is in a sense.
Every shofet a navi?
No, right? We don't see that, right? But
and every melech is obviously not a navi.
Every melech is definitely not a navi, right? So we see this idea when you think about it. A shofet, he can't raise taxes. He's not doing things.
Doesn't have a government.
He don't have official government. I mean, it seems to be okay.
He's just the guy that people like, no?
Right? And he has influence, and he's going to influence the people for Abudat Hashem if he's a good shofet. And that's kind of what happens. Is this a bad thing? Not necessarily. Hypothetically, the shofet system works. What do we need? What do we need in Am Yisrael that we need a melech and a shofet is not good enough? So, and here the answer is a little bit tricky. It depends how you view the status of Shiloh. The Mishkan in Shiloh. Do they think it's the Beit HaMikdash? Do they think it's Hamakom Hashem Hadashim or no? Keep in mind, there's only a push to rebuild the Beit HaMikdash, only once Shiloh is destroyed. Right? We're not used to thinking that way, right? We're used to thinking Shiloh was temporary, and therefore
we need displaced, no, is it?
Yeah, but that's in Shmuel, right? We're used to thinking that the Mishkan is temporary, and therefore there's always a desire to build the Beit HaMikdash, and therefore everybody was a bum until David came around and decided to build the Beit HaMikdash, and God bless David HaMelech for being the only one to think about it. And Am Yisrael, and we didn't have a melech to do this. And if you read the halachot of the Rambam, do you have to have a melech and then build a Beit HaMikdash? Sure, very nice. But if we say Yehoshua was in effect a certain type of leader, and they put the Mishkan in Shiloh, and it could be Al Pi Hashem, they put the Mishkan in Shiloh. And we realize the Mishkan lasts for 369 years. And we realize, according to the halakha, that they got rid of the Yiri'ot, of the walls of the Mishkan, and they made walls from Avanim. All of a sudden, it takes on a little bit of a different thought. And the only time they start really being interested in rebuilding is when the Aaron goes into exile. But it's not just Aaron goes into exile. We realize from Sefer Yirmiyahu much later that the Mishkan got destroyed. And it's interesting, based on Sefer Yirmiyahu, Pedekei, the way he says it, it actually sounds like I destroyed my place in Shiloh, I could destroy my place down in the Beit HaMikdash, which essentially is saying the Beit HaMikdash is really not the original building. The Mishkan was the equivalent to the Beit HaMikdash. So it's really a very interesting thing when we think about all these ideas. Maybe Shoftim, not a terrible idea. The concept works and it's a healthy thing, because it ensures there's no corruption. It ensures that, okay, we have one guy and we know he's a good guy because we chose him, and then go home, very good, you die, and he keep Am Yisrael, and then we find the next guy as the need be, but each time the guy is going to be worthy, if we're worthy of it.
We've never seen Bnei Yisrael succeed without a king yet, though, meaning
so what do you mean?
Without a dynamic
I want you to think about this. You ready? Between Otniel and Ehud, you have 120 good years.
Yeah.
How many good years did we have as a king?
No,
David, maybe.
No, I'm saying that the experiment almost of Shoftim is a very risky experiment, because you go from Moshe, Yehoshua to nobody so quickly, and it's like the people, they're going from Moshe to Yehoshua, the two of the greatest leaders of all time, to nothing.
But
it's a huge risk.
But that's the point. There's the Kenim involved, and then you have a wonderful fellow named Otniel ben Kenaz who could rise to the equation. So is the Melech. How long did the Melech last before we split the kingdom? No, think about it for a second. David, 33 years over all of Am Yisrael.
40 years of Shmuel.
No, but 7 years only of Yehuda, and Shloshim v'shalosh al kol Yisrael, right?
40 years Shlomo, no?
Okay, 40 years Shlomo.
And 3 years of Rehoboam.
Okay, so that's 76 years. Here I have 120. Right? Meaning, think about it for a second. And then it was doomed to fail. The second I had two kings, and Yerovam ben Nevat, and we're doomed to fail. And it never really worked. And not only that,
the kingdoms
but there was. But so this system lasted 400 years as well, right? Think about it. There's the Mishkan lasted 369 years. I was saying so. The Beit Hamikdash lasted 410. Okay, extra couple of years. But at least the Mishkan everybody could come to, right? The Beit Hamikdash not everybody could come to.
Would you say that the 40 years of Otniel matches up with the 33 years of David?
Listen, that's so simple. Keep in mind, David, you had multiple.
The peak of the history of Bnei Israel.
But keep in mind, David, you had multiple rebellions.
No, go to Shlomo.
Okay, Shlomo, 40 years. How many people did he have to kill in order to ensure he was going to become the Melech? Right?
It was a mess.
Right, so it's a mess. In order to become the Melech. Then, once he's a Melech, the fact that the kingdom break 3 years later tells us all that there was a facade of greatness, but it was really much more complicated. Am Yisrael was very grumpy about what was happening, about the taxes that Shlomo made. We read as a glory and a beautiful thing. You realize for the common man, not always so great, especially once he introduces Avodah Zarah, according to the text of the Navi, or whatever it is. We start having cracks in the system. So the Shofet almost could be a very good system and prevents corruption. What's the real problem? What's the real problem with Sefer Shoftim? What is Sefer Shoftim really trying to get you to focus on? We're completely missing the point. We're barking up the wrong tree. I really don't think keep in mind it's a mahloket tanaim whether a melech is even a mitzvah. And even if we want to say it's a mitzvah, who's to say it has to be a melech in the way the Torah said exactly? Maybe it's any form of rulership, which could be the Shofet. I don't know. But I definitely think we're barking up the wrong tree when we look at Sefer Shoftim and say it's all about the failure to have a melech. Sefer Shoftim is the failure to create an independent Jewish identity. Watch how this plays out. Sefer Shoftim, they start worshiping Avodah Zarah. They're not doing what they're supposed to do. Go back to your towns and do what? Create a Jewish society. Create something different. Meaning, we forgot. You know what we forgot? We're so focused on capturing. We forgot all of Sefer Devarim. What was Sefer Devarim teaching us? How a Jewish society is supposed to look. Then all of a sudden, we get to Sefer Shoftim, and what does the Shofet tell us? This is not the Jewish society the way it's supposed to look. They're learning from the Goyim. They're worshipping Avodah Zarah. So you say, okay, they're worshipping Avodah Zarah, but I don't really know what it means. But then you start seeing people retracting from each other. You see the lack of unity, which when you have one God, it definitely creates a abundance of unity, despite maybe having a shofet from here, a shofet from there. Who cares, right? I don't need a melech to have unity. I have a God, V'Hashem Elohechem Malkechem. He's the one who's going to make you unified. So that's number one. And number two, we do see later on the failures and cracks within the society. And that is the Pesel Micha story.
Gid'on carries around the golden thing
story. Gid'on has
considered the best.
Fails to fully live up to what he's supposed to live up to. Yiftach fails to live up to. And we get this sense, where's my Jewish society that's supposed to be better than everyone else? And who's suffering the whole time of Sefer Shoftim? Hashem. Right? And that's clear. We're going to see fascinating Pesukim that talk about Hashem's response. What we already saw in Perek Bet, he sends a Navi, and they start crying. But also in Perek Gimel, when we see that what we read about that whole story of the cycle of the Shoftim, where is it? No, sorry, at the end of Perek Bet, and then at the beginning of Perek Gimel, we see kind of this failure, the sadness of Hashem, and you're going to see fascinating words going on in the rest of Sefer Shoftim. I think what we need to focus on, you want to know what Sefer Shoftim is really about. It's a question of what is a Jewish society and how are these ideals supposed to come to fruition. And the sad part is we don't see it. We don't see it. So therefore, by the end...
Shmuel, saying in Shoftim we don't see it.
Right, so in Shoftim we don't see it. Obviously, Shmuel, we're going to start seeing it. But therefore, now you can understand what the book is saying at the end. By the end of the book, it's saying, okay, we're in trouble. We're so far gone, we can't get out of the cycle. We've lost such an identity of what Am Yisrael is supposed to look like. Now, we turn almost to Sodom. The Ramban plays on that idea. So now, maybe let's get a melech. Let's have something different that maybe could create a change.
Shemuel comes first.
It's not the first step. Shemuel comes first. But that if you want to analyze Shemuel, we'll do it very quickly because it's not really what we're supposed to be doing now, right? Keep in mind, the first step is in Melech. It does conclude in Melech. We need a Melech to get us back, but not because we couldn't do without him. Only because the situation where we are by the end of the book, that now we're in trouble. So Shemuel is interesting. You say, oh, Shemuel comes first, but it's clear. Shemuel only exists to introduce Shaul and David. Meaning, I need Shemuel to confer the authority of God upon Shaul and David. How do I know this? You're going to answer me. Because basically, from Perek Yud, Shemuel Aleph on, Shemuel's out of the picture. You can't have a book that's 60 Perakim, right, between the two of them, that talks about a guy who for 10 Perakim say he's the main guy. And almost we see it right away, right? Am Yisrael, when they're coming and requesting king, it's not enough what you did. The reforms that you did are not enough. We need to take it a little bit further. Okay, now Shemuel ends up being, they might be asking for the wrong reason. They might have different reasons why they're asking. That might be why Shemuel get upset. But I think the end of the book, don't make the mistake. And I think this is like just from a process, perspective. Don't make the mistake of taking the end of the book and putting in the beginning of the book. Don't do that. Let the book progress naturally. They failed to create a Jewish society. They failed to live up to Moshe Rabbeinu's words at Sefer Devarim. And then we get the sense of not only are they failing, it's like crisis mode. So then we say, okay, maybe now we need a melech to take us out of, because you need that strong-willed person that could take us out of something. Okay. But it's not, it doesn't mean that the melech versus the shofet is a polemic here in talking about this. By the way, this one, so it's kind of random, but what's his name? Thomas Paine, right? American Revolution. He writes the book or the pamphlet Common Sense to try to argue for rebellion against King George. What does he use? He used Sefer Shoftim. He used Mashal Yotam. He uses the ideas of Sefer Shoftim to prove from the Bible that a king is a bad thing. Right? Meaning, and I think he has a point, not that I think we need to learn Bible from Thomas Paine, but meaning the fact that he could, in a polemic against king, if he could use Sefer Shoftim, but it makes us realize that maybe things are not so simple, and we have to do a little bit of a better job of reading the book. So we'll pause here for tonight, and hopefully you'll look at the book with these fresh eyes.